Hi, this is Brian Johnson. I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Welcome to A Productive Conversation. It's me, Mike Vardy, and I am joined today by Brian Johnson. He's the founder and CEO of Heroic Public Benefit Corporation, and he's the author of Areté, Activate Your Heroic Potential. We talk about that book today. It's been a while since I've chatted with Brian, so it was a really great opportunity to catch up. I've gone through the book more since the actual conversation that we had. It's big, it's deep, it's a lot of what we talk about here, both on the show, but also inside of my Time Crafting Trust Premium community. A lot of the stuff that Brian gets into, I love. And we get into quite a bit of it during our conversation here today on the show. So I hope you enjoy it. Here is my conversation, and a productive one at that, with Brian Johnson. Brian, thanks so much for joining me for a productive conversation today.
Mike, I am thrilled to be here for a productive conversation.
So I want to dive into the concept of the book that's coming out. I want to hear you pronounce the word, because some people say it one way. Some people, it's like the idea between saying tomato and tomato. Some people pronounce it one way or the other. So what is the name of the book, and why is that the name of the book? Why is this word such an important piece of what you're doing?
Yeah, I like to pronounce it Areté. It's debatable. I went to my go-to guy is a guy named Tom Morris, who's got 2 PhDs from Yale in philosophy and religious studies, literally wrote the book Philosophy for Dummies. He has granted me the blessing that Areté is, in fact, in a proper way to pronounce it. But that's the name of the book. I got a tattoo, Areté, on my right forearm. I'm all in on it. It's the one-word summation of my entire life's work. It's Aristotle's one-word answer to how to live a great life. It's what the Stoics came back to again and again and again. And frankly, it's one of those words that I think we need to reintroduce into our cultural vocabulary. And it's a shame that it ever fell out of use. It's such a powerful word that captures so much of what I think it means to live a great life. So to answer the question, well, what does it mean? We translate Areté as excellence or virtue, but it has a deeper meaning, something closer to expressing the best version of yourself moment to moment to moment. Idiosyncratically, you've got your style, I've got mine. But the basic idea, the way I like to describe it, in the first chapters of the book, I explain it like you're 10. I tell a story about my son and I walking on our little trail on our property when he was going through a challenge. And I like to hold up a line about eye level and say, look, if you're capable of being this, but there's a gap and you're being this, a foot lower, my hand's kind of creating a gap there. You could be this, but you are being this. It's in that gap between who you could have been and who you're actually being, in which regret, anxiety, disillusionment, depression exists. If you can close the gap and express the best version of yourself and live with Areté, then you'll experience a deep sense of meaning, joy. The ancient Greeks called that eudaimonia, which we translate as flourishing or happiness, but you just feel alive. So that's the essence of all of my work, and why I tattooed my body with it, why the book is named that, etc.
So it's interesting you mentioned that you want to narrow that gap. You want to, I think a lot of people, when they, especially in the context of productivity and what we talk about here, and I'm a big believer in like productivity being broken, and we're focusing too much on speed and not enough on depth, that kind of thing. But the interesting thing when you were talking about that was this idea of closing the gap. Is it something that people need to keep in mind, that it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing? Because I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people go, dude, okay, I'm going to close that gap, and then it's forever going to be that close. So let's dispel that myth a little bit, I think.
It's a moment to 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 moment decision. And again, if you want to show up, in your productivity, I love your show and the theme of your show, because you're talking about not just showing up powerfully at work, but also at home. So the way that we describe it is a good life comes down to 3 things. Of course, your work and your productivity, and of course, your home and your love and connection and relationships. But if your energy isn't where it needs to be, then you're not going to show up, powerfully in your work or your love. So we call that the big 3: energy, work, and love. But I think there's a couple challenges to showing up powerfully from my vantage point. First, you got to know the ultimate game. It's not chasing all the extrinsic fame, wealth, hotness things, and all that stuff. And then the second challenge is it's not going to be easy, and you're never going to get there. There's no there.
Yeah.
As my coach, Phil Studd, says, you're never going to be exonerated from pain, uncertainty, and hard work. So moment to moment, we have a challenge to step up and express the best version of ourselves or not. And to the extent we let a lot of gaps come in the day, those are the days we want to numb ourselves at the end of the day, whether that's binge drinking or binge watching, whatever it is you do. We all got our kryptonite.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a really important point. And then it becomes fun. It's not a joyless chore that you're going through. It's no. What am I capable of? How do I show up as the best, most heroic version of myself? And truly make it a game and use all the tips and tools and tricks that you teach and practices to do something that you really enjoy. You feel great while you're doing it, etc.
So an interesting follow-up, especially for people who deal with a lot of external forces, right? And they have a hard time kind of steering clear, or they get really loud, like the expectations of others and things. I'll use this as an example. Energy makes perfect sense to me in a lot of ways. I talk about it as one of the, kind of attention paths you should use to kind of gear what you're going to do when you're going to do it kind of thing. I'm a night owl. The fact, this is the first thing, our conversation is the first thing I'm doing today, because that's the way my body clock is wired. But we live in a world that's kind of saying, hey, you be an early riser, being a night owl, there's stigma and that kind of thing associated with it. So you end up not, you're kind of directed to not listen to your natural body rhythms, and instead you're like, well, I should get up early because that's what everybody else does. I think what's interesting about Areté is that it is I know the phrase. It's mentioned in Robert Pirsig's book on quality. It's been mentioned several times. My friend David Sparks, he loves the term as well. But the world doesn't seem to gear itself towards that. It's almost like we're a commodity in the cog, as opposed to being able to act as individuals within that. So when people are faced with that, for lack of a better term, reality or that function, how do we keep them, or how do you keep them on the path that's going to get them to where they want to go and live in that fashion, show up powerfully, yep, despite the fact that the world may have other ideas for them based on, expectations, the way things are geared, et cetera?
Yeah, brilliant. It's interesting because this is literally objective 1 in the book. We've got 7 objectives. We train coaches as well, and everything I do is around 7 objectives. The first objective, they're all important, but the first one is you got to know the ultimate game. So we've been seduced to play the wrong game. So we think we need to chase, the fame, the wealth, the hotness, the Instagram followers, the square footage in our house. And we know intellectually that that's absurd, that isn't actually what we want. In David Brooks's Second Mountain, right? You get to the top of the first mountain, you're like, wait, this is it? I'm supposed to be happy here? Or Stephen Covey, he tells us in 7 Habits, you climb up the ladder, and often you get to the top of the ladder and realize you put it up against the wrong wall.
Yeah.
So the first most important thing to recognize is, well, what game are you playing? Because in a profoundly sick society, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to that society. And you want to get clear on what's actually important. And again, what all the great ancient wisdom teachers and what modern scientists tell us is it's intrinsic stuff. It's becoming a better person, deepening your personal relationships, and making a contribution to your family, your team, your community. But it sounds obvious, and it is obvious, and it sounds very simple, and it is simple. But we got to step back just half an inch, and see it, and then architect our lives to play that game well. And then things start shifting. And we look at it and say, all right, well, who am I at my best in my energy, in my work, and my love? What do I do when I'm at my best? What virtues do I embody? And what specific things do I do? And really concretely, systematically build a protocol that we can rely on, that sometimes, to your point, will go in the face of, if not almost all the time, how we've been kind of conditioned to show up. And then to your point, you're going to have an idiosyncratic expression of you at your best. And, if your rhythms are what your rhythms are, then that's perfect. Now, if people are blowing themselves up with technology until 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. and they're just wasting their life, to be blunt, and then they're waking up at 6 or 7, tired and exhausted and burned out and can't figure out why their life sucks, Well, we want to have an honest conversation about that.
Right.
And say, look, you're watching pseudo heroes, whether it's in a reality TV show or a sports, broadcast. Maybe you should slow down and become the hero of your own life. And I'm intense in pushing people to wake up. This isn't a dress rehearsal, but then architect your life on your terms, but do it with virtue, do it with excellence, and do it consistently, which is a big part of my work as well. Is this isn't a once in a while thing. Great. I love the art of motor, the per se Areté. It's moment to moment to moment again. Mm-hmm. You're always capable of something. Are you being that? Again, never perfectly, but more and more consistently.
Well, and I think the other thing about, why he brings that up in that book is because quality is so hard to define. Like, it's such a, he spent his entire life trying to explain it. And he even, when you read that book, you're like, he's still trying to figure it out. And the problem with I think that some people will face is, and knowing the work that you've done in the past, as well as, and I've not had a chance to read the book yet, but I can't wait because I know that, based on the work that you've done, that quality shows up. Like the world loves to measure things, but they love to measure things in an objective way, right? Inbox 0, check off these boxes, right? Losing weight, right? No problem with that. But the measurement shouldn't necessarily be the amount of pounds that you see on the scale. It should be because that might not be telling you the entire story, right? And so sometimes the quantity doesn't tell you everything. And quality is where I think we should live more. And, that's definitely where you're going with, especially with Areté. But it's hard because people, when people think about productivity, when they think about I've got to make the most of my time, I've got to maximize my minutes. It's like, yes, but to what end? And this is exactly what you're talking about. Like, what is the game you're trying to play? But speaking of games, I remember listening to David Robinson and his son. They have a podcast called The Fundamentals. It's fantastic. It's a very short series. And I'm a big San Antonio Spurs fan, mainly because of David Robinson. And one thing he said on that show, which has stuck with me, he says, in order to be great, you have to be great at the fundamentals. And you've talked about the idea of life's fundamentals. So can we talk a little bit about the fundamentals, the life's fundamentals, and how to get great or even dominate on those?
Dude, let's go. Yeah. So then very quickly it's the 6th objective of my book. So I'm all about the fundamentals. So objective 1 is you got to know the ultimate game. Objective 2 is you forge anti-fragile confidence, the opposite of fragility. I talk about that a lot. It's my favorite subject, frankly. The way you do that is you know your protocol and you execute it, especially when you don't feel like it.
Right.
Longer chat. Objective 3 is you optimize the big 3 that we talked about: energy, work, and love. The objective 4 is masterpiece days. You make today a masterpiece, not someday, not New Year's resolutions, new days resolutions. Then objective 5 is you master yourself, the art and science of behavioral change, installing, deleting habits, all that stuff. But then objective 6 is dominate the fundamentals. Eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, focusing are the 5 I focus on. And I kicked that objective off with a chapter on John Wooden. So I went to UCLA, love that you love the Spurs. I live in Austin, so they're right down the street. And
I'm just showing the Ted Lasso Funko Pop that I have, because if the video's out, you're seeing that because Ted Lasso, the Pyramid of Success, is on Ted Lasso's wall in the Ted Lasso show, which comes from John Wooden. So
Brilliant. All right. So then John Wooden, I kick off the chapter on dominating the fundamentals. Why should we dominate the fundamentals? Well, here are a few metaphors. One, if you want to see how tall a building is going to be, look at how deeply they're digging the foundation. If you're in a single story house, perfect. You don't really need one. Just get a slab and put it up. You want to build a skyscraper, you have to dig deep. Your fundamentals, your foundation matters. And then John Wooden, greatest coach in history, according to many. Go UCLA Bruins, 10 championships in 12 years, some 88-game winning streak, absurd. Best coach of the era of history, had the best athletes come to his program at UCLA before he would let them touch a basketball. He would teach them the most fundamental act of a basketball player, which is how to put on their socks. He'd personally do it. Here, boys, this is how you do it. Get it over your toes, pull it up over your heel, pull it up nice and snug. Why would they do that? Why would they do that together? Obviously, if they couldn't do that, they might get bored. miss a little practice time. They wouldn't perform as well. But the idea that the most basic fundamentals are the most important is such a powerful concept. The professionals, the world-class performers get that. The amateurs, the kind of mediocre performers, think they can get to a point where they can ignore it. And there's something powerful about identifying what your idiosyncratic fundamentals are, which again is the whole point of my work is, and the practical way to do this is get out a piece of paper, and on the piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, and on the left put do, and on the right put don't. And then think of the things you do when you're at your best, whether it's the most productive version of yourself, energized, connected, etc. You do certain things when you are at your absolute best, and you don't do other things when you're at your best. Those do's are your basic fundamentals. And a great life is getting clarity on that, executing those, never giving up your gains. If you've done it in the past, why aren't you doing it right now? And make your prior best your new baseline is how Josh Waitzkin brilliantly puts it. And that's it right there. You've already done it in the past. We just need to get you to more consistently do it. And then your life just takes on this totally different meaning, moving from burnout to feeling more energized, more productive, more connected. But anyway, long answer to your short question. It's all about the fundamentals.
Right.
Those basic, unsexy, mundane things we want to do relentlessly if we want to have a shot at truly actualizing our potential.
And you'll notice really none of them are independently related to work. They're universal, right? Focusing isn't just focus on work. Focusing is focusing in general, right? It's like, that's why I don't like the term work-life balance. Just throw the word throw the adjective out. Like just balance, right? Like, because we live in a world that there's integrations between the two at this point, right? Remote, distributed workforce, all that stuff. But it's fascinating when I look at those fundamentals that you couldn't say, well, that's related to work. None of them are. They're all related to all of it, which is amazing, fascinating to me. What's the seventh? The seventh one. Let's get into that.
The seventh is to activate your superpower. And I want to come back to that because that's so powerful. The seventh is activate your superpower. I call it soul force. So if you think of your favorite heroes, like who are your favorite heroes? I ask you, all right,
Green Lantern,
who do you admire?
Green Lantern. Are you talking about like superheroes? Or are you talking about like heroes?
Yeah, fictional is cool.
Sure.
Any historical figures or those?
Yeah,
in your life?
I'm a. Ooh boy, there's lots of. I'm looking around my study here. I've got a few. Fan of Pressfield. Stephen Pressfield, I think, is a fan. Love his work. I mentioned David Robinson. I loved his.
There you go.
There you go. I mean, he's a guy. Just to give you quick context around it, and he actually had the right culture fit too, because he finished college and then was drafted by the Spurs. But
Naval Academy.
Yeah,
he lived up anywhere. He lived up to
Naval Academy. He did, and he lived up to. Excuse me. He lived up to his obligation. And the Spurs, and to their credit, drafted him knowing full well that they would do that. And what I loved about just the way he carried himself, not just on the court, but off the court. So yeah, let's go with him.
So what David Robinson Goosebumps has, and Stephen Pressfield has, that's expressed in his work. You read a Stephen Pressfield book, whether it's his nonfiction stuff, War of Art, et cetera, or his fiction, you feel his soul force. Right. When you think of David Robinson, you feel a moral charisma that he has. My heroes on my wall, I've got Gandhi, Marcus Aurelius, my own kids, but I've got, when we think of our heroes, they're all different. David Robinson's is, what is he, 7'1" or something like that? You're just insane, He's different than a Gandhi, who is different than a Churchill. And Churchill and Gandhi, two of my heroes, didn't even like each other.
No.
One's portly, talked all the time. The other's frail and would take days off of talking. But they both had soul force. They had a moral charisma about them because they were living in integrity with their highest ideals. If they're in a room, you feel their presence. So what I like to say is if you execute the objectives 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you activate your own soul force, that's what we need. You're the hero we've been waiting for, and people will feel it. You'll feel it. Your family will feel it. Your team will feel it. That's the seventh objective. And then to go back to the fundamentals briefly, I have work fundamentals as well. So my work fundamentals, I start every day recommitting to a sacred vow I made. We happen to make history, crowdfunding history, raised $5 million from our community, the first ever to do it. I have 3,000 investors from 75 countries. Before I signed the documents to make it official, I drafted a vow, like I did when I got married to my wife. And every morning I recommit to that vow that I'm going to practice my philosophy and serve them and make them proud. Do my best. I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm going to do my best. Takes me 10 seconds to reread it and recommit to it. Then I'm creative before I'm reactive. I will never turn on my phone to check email or read text until I have done the most important thing for the day. That's a fundamental. And I like to joke, I get more done by the time most people get up than I used to do in a whole week.
Right.
Because now I'm energized. I've got a good night of sleep. I'm showing up and I'm doing the most important thing that day. And then the third fundamental practice I have is I end my day. Pressfield talks about this in his most recent book. The office is closed, he says. Cal Newport says, shut down complete. So I end my day. It doesn't flood into the rest of my night. I don't check my email 2 minutes before I go to bed. I'm shutting down 30, 60, 90 minutes, 2 hours before I'm going to bed, 2 hours when I'm doing it right. I'm spending time with my kids. I'm turning my brain off. And that's a fundamental practice. And then I've got a number of other ones. But the basic idea is it's hard to have a bad day when you've taken the time to get clarity on who you are and what you do at your best, energy, work, and love, and you do it. But you make it easy to win, but you do it.
Well,
you know?
and even if you do have a bad day, which happens, those bookends, because I have a morning routine and an evening routine as well that are very, very clearly defined. There's not too much to it. Like, I love how you didn't say there's like 43 steps, because that's where it'll fall apart. There's like three and three, right? Like at the end of the night, I will journal. I will close out, that's the last thing I do. And then I do have my own study down in the basement. And yes, I shut the door. Like I leave and I shut the door. And and I need to do that because I'm not good in the mornings. So I set myself up the night before, and then I can start my day in the best way possible, right? Which means, so for me, the most important work doesn't get done first thing by its grand definition, but the most important work based on what I can offer at that time of day does. So that's and so the nuance is, I think, really important, which you've brought up, which to me it's interesting that people, number one, most people when I talk to them, they don't have an evening or shutdown routine. They don't, which is and to circle back to what I was saying, if you have a crap day, you at least know that it will end, because you have an end to it. And so the bookends are brilliant because they actually allow you to, they're the certainty around the uncertainty. And if you've got enough, kind of gumption and power behind them, which you do, then the likelihood of crap going sideways that you have control or command over is much lower, because you've kind of set yourself up both at the beginning and at the end. So that's to me, like you said, that's fundamental.
100%. The AM and PM bookends. And then, you're going to have highs and lows, to state the obvious. We're never going to get to a point where it's all just, let's go. But the highs get higher and the lows get higher. And truly going off the rails, where the circus comes into town, you wake up, a day or 5 or 10 or 50 later, and you're like, where'd my life go? Like, when you get clear on who you are at your best and you do it, especially when you don't feel like it, your life changes. That's the essence of Objective 2. Because most people, when life hits them hard, what do? Me at my less than enlightened states as well, and all of us, of course, we do the stupid things, the vicious things, not the virtuous things. So if you can reverse that, and if when you feel the worst, as my coach, Phil Stutz, who actually works with the guy who produces Ted Lasso, is in the Netflix documentary called Stutz,
which is great. Right? I've watched. We'll link to it in the show notes. Yeah, I watched it when it came out. It was really good, and I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there that I just was like, yes, this resonates. This resonates. I didn't know he worked with Bill Lawrence. That's who you're talking about, right? Who the guy who created Ted Lasso? Yeah.
I mean, So Phil's just a national treasure. If you haven't watched the documentary, you don't mind some F-bombs, check it out. He's awesome. I've worked with him 400 one-on-one sessions.
Wow.
He wrote the foreword to the book. He's my spiritual father, and we talk about him a lot in the book, and it's brilliant. One of the things he taught me is something called emotional stamina. He said, hey, you got a lot of emotional stamina at the end of one of our first chats. I'm like, I have no idea what that is, but thanks. Next chat, what's emotional stamina? And he says, well, you can endure a lot of ambiguity and hardship, et cetera, without kind of going sideways. And the way you can do that more and more consistently is the worse you feel, the more committed you need to be to your protocol. Now, most people don't have a protocol And when they're feeling bad, they go off the rails and again, they don't come back. But we want to get clear on our protocol, which is the do and don't, simplified.
Yep.
And then we want to remember the worse we feel, the more committed we are. I call that anti-fragile confidence, where you build the trust in yourself, which is what true confidence is. And it's life-changing. You even get 2, 3, 5% better at that. Everything changes. And then it is hard to have a really, really, really bad day when you know the 3 things you do in energy: work and love. And you do them especially after you have an off day. It's difficult to capture the power of that, but everything changes. And because the moments that used to make you go off the rails and spiraling out become the moments that catalyze you to be the next best version of yourself. Then you're anti-fragile. Well, you get stronger when life hits you hard.
And I think that, to your point, the challenge for most people, and I'm being general here, is they don't feel like they have the time to sit down and do the stuff that the front end work.
Yeah. So my playful response to that is, let me follow you around for a day.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes out of your unbelievably perfectly productive day. And again, I say that playfully, but intensely. But the reality is someone is following you around. And this is what the ancient Greeks and Stoics would call your daimon. There's a part of you, and Maslow says the same thing, that is keeping track of every single thing you do. And he says every single violation of you not being your best self registers. It makes an imprint in your consciousness. And I have goosebumps as I say that. And that's Maslow, self-actualizing, individual. Someone's paying attention. And and again, this stuff isn't complicated. My job is to kind of, shake you a little bit, maybe not you, but myself, Yeah. All right, come on. Like, again, this isn't a dress rehearsal. You know so much more what you can do. And to put a fine point to the broad exercise, do and don't. Then the challenge is circle the number one thing that you could be doing, that if you started doing it would most change your life. And then circle the number one thing that you need to stop doing, that if you stop doing it would most change your life. I do that all the time. Anytime I get a little wobbly or anytime I want to go next level, I slow down, ask myself that question. And then, you develop the discipline to do it more consistently. Again, not perfectly, but it's fun. But that I don't have time. God bless you.
Yeah.
You do.
Well, you have
Cubbies.
You have to kind of, like, it's the same thing with journaling. When people say, I don't have time to journal, I'm like, did you go on social media today? They're like, yeah. I'm like, well, then you have time. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you just journaled for the whole world, though. Like, journal for yourself instead of for the whole world. I've actually said to people, I'm like, if people spent more time journaling the thoughts that they had that they needed to get out instead of posting them on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, or X, I guess, social media would be probably a much better place to hang out because we get a lot of just like the bruh. But that's the thing, is that I don't have time. There is time. You just got to, it comes down to, again, the soft, or not soft, but the qualitative elements of, like, prioritization and, again, getting clear and sitting. I mean, I take retreats every year, a personal retreat, where this is the kind of stuff that I sit down, because when you're on your own in a place and you do it in a place where you are literally going to do that, you can't escape it, and you've set yourself up. It doesn't take a lot to set yourself up to do this kind of stuff. And the fact that you've got, like, a handbook, basically not just that, but your community, which we'll touch on as we wrap up here. But you've got this book that's going to help people go through that process. So they've got a manual to a degree. They just need to, again, like you said, the idiosyncratic stuff. That's where they need to figure out, okay, how do I take this and work with who I am and who I truly am, so that I can be, so that when I'm doing stuff, it's leading me to who I want to be instead of just doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff.
Yeah, and Covey had a great frame for that as well, briefly. Those of us who say we don't have time, we all do that. I mean, I'm being playfully intense right now, but of course we all have that story. But Covey says, look, imagine you're out in a forest and someone is sawing down a tree, and they're working and working and working, and it's very obvious to you that their saw is dull, the blade is dull. So you suggest to them, I think you may want to step back and sharpen the saw. I think you'd be more efficient and effective in your work. And they say, of course, I'm too busy to slow down to sharpen my saw, to which we say, don't be that guy. It's like driving. If you're feeling burned out and enervated and you're driving, well, your fuel tank is almost gone. You don't have time to stop at the gas station. You don't have time to stop reflect, and figure out who you are at your best and start shaping your life more consciously, perfect. You're gonna have to stop at some point, whether that's in a hospital or that's in a wherever else you're gonna be. And now's the time, and it's simultaneously willingness to embrace that, I think, is so important. Yeah, again, we could talk about that for a weekend.
Oh, and we didn't get into things like willpower and discipline and there's so much there, but I want people to pick up the book, which literally, as this episode dropped, just came out. So the book is called Areté, Activate Your Heroic Potential. Brian, where can people pick up the book, but you've got a community, which I'm in as well, that, I think would be worthwhile for people to check out as well. So share where the people can pick up the book and where they can check out more about you and the community you've built.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Amazon, Canada, and US, and then everywhere books are sold. You can pick up the book. You can learn more about it at heroic.us/book. And then my company is called Heroic Public Benefit Corporation. We're building an app actually with a Vancouver-based product development firm, built it, MetaLab, the same company.
They're actually based here in Victoria, so I know Andrew. Yeah. I know Andrew and the team there. Yeah.
Yeah, we love them. So they helped build Slack, Tinder, Uber Eats, Elon Musk's new business, Neuralink. They helped us build the Heroic app, which is a social training platform. So it's got a lot of elements of a Facebook where you can connect with people who are into conversations like this without all the toxicity. And it brings all the stuff we talked about into a really practical, systematic way to help you get clarity on your protocol, who you are at your best, energy, work, and love. And then you hit targets every day that are in integrity with the fundamentals we discussed. But yeah, heroic.us, US, and then /book, but Amazon, all the other places you'd expect.
Brian, this has been great. It's been far too long since we've had a productive conversation. I'm glad we took the time to do it today.
Me too. Thanks for having me, Mike. Great chat.
Thanks to Brian for joining me on the program today. You can check out all of the relevant links and show notes either in the app you're using right now to listen to this program or at productivityist.com/podcast501. If you are listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, just hit the subscribe button. That's one way to support the show. That way you won't miss a single episode of what is to come. And it can also easily search through the archives in the over 500 episodes that we have produced to date. Another way to support the show is to check out the sponsors that you heard during the conversation today. Go to productivityist.com/podcast sponsors to check those sponsors out. That way, when you check them out and you visit them and you take part or sample their wares and their services, they know that we sent you. That's it for this episode of A Productive Conversation. Until next time, I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.